On Christmas Eve, I came home without warning. I found my daughter shivering outside at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. No blanket to keep her warm. My son-in-law's family was laughing, toasting with champagne by the fireplace. I kicked the door open, holding my daughter in my arms, and said 6 words. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my revenge story from. I want to know how far it's reached. I stepped out of the taxi. My heavy boots sank into the thick layer of snow outside my daughter's house in Boise, Idaho. The icy wind slapped my face like it wanted to peel my skin off, forcing me to pull up the collar of my coat. After years as a taekwondo coach, I thought I was used to any challenge, from the sweltering heat of the dojo to the harshest winters. But this Christmas Eve cold made me shiver. I stood there in front of the warmly lit house, a mix of excitement and nerves swirling inside me. Today, I wanted to surprise Emily. I wanted to see my little girl's radiant smile when her mom showed up out of the blue. After so many months away, the front yard was buried in snow. Not a single footprint in sight, like no one cared enough to clear it. Through the big picture window, I could see the cozy glow spilling out from the living room, where cheerful Christmas music played from a Bluetooth speaker. The song Jingle Bells, Emily's favorite when she was a kid, filled the air. I stepped closer, trying to peek inside. A long table, draped in a bright red tablecloth, stretched out in front of me, loaded with traditional dishes. A golden roasted turkey, steaming plates of cornbread stuffing, a bowl of cranberry salad with shiny bits of apple and raisin, and glasses of red wine glinting under the lights. The Whitlock family, my son-in-law's folks, was gathered in full. I recognized Mr. Harold Whitlock, Ryan's dad, sitting with an air of authority, and Mrs. Evelyn Whitlock, his mum, holding a glass of wine with a smug smile on her lips. Ryan's sister Abigail was there too, with her 2 young kids laughing non-stop. They were all raising their glasses, toasting around the crackling fireplace. But where was Emily? I frowned, straining to see further inside, thinking maybe she was tucked in some corner. I'd pictured her smiling, chatting happily, like in the old days when she'd wrap her arms around my neck, telling me endless stories. Then I heard a noise, a faint whimper coming from the porch. I turned and my heart stopped. Under the dim light, next to a snow-covered poinsettia planter, Emily was curled up in an old wooden chair. She wore only a thin blouse, her frail shoulders shaking uncontrollably, her messy hair sticking to her forehead, damp from melted snow. I ran to her, my heart pounding like a drum. "Emily," I shouted, my voice breaking with panic. I yanked off my coaching jacket and wrapped it around her with urgency. My trembling hands touched her arm. It was ice cold, like there was no warmth left in her. Emily lifted her face, her eyes red, her pale lips barely whispering, "Mom." Her voice was so faint, it almost dissolved into the air, and she collapsed against my shoulder. I hugged her tightly, feeling her body shake like a bird caught in a storm. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here," I whispered, trying to sound calm, though tears burned in my eyes. I pulled an extra sweater from my bag and wrapped it around Emily, trying to share some of my warmth. I lifted her in my arms as her soaked slippers fell into the snow, leaving a messy trail. I held her close, feeling her weak breath against my neck. In that moment, all I wanted was to get her out of there, away from the biting cold, away from whatever had brought her to this state. But then, from inside the house, the laughter kept going, careless and cruel. I clearly heard Ryan's deep voice, smug and boastful, bragging about something. The whole table erupted in laughter, and the clinking of glasses sounded like distant, eerie music. They were happy, cozy by the fireplace, while my daughter, my own flesh and blood, was trembling outside in the cold, like she didn't deserve to be in that house. Just a few hours ago, I was at the Boise airport, still sweaty from a week of coaching the national taekwondo team. The heat of the mats seemed to linger on me, even as I stood in the chilly airport lobby. I dragged my old suitcase, so excited I could hardly stand still, imagining Emily's face lighting up when I showed up unannounced on Christmas Eve. My heart was racing. She'd always been my light, ever since she was a little girl, clinging to my legs, begging for one more bedtime story, growing into a sweet young woman whose smile could melt away my toughest days. But my job as head coach took me from place to place. Seattle, national tournaments, stealing moments with Emily. Every time I left, I told myself, just one more tournament, then I'll be with her. And now I was here, ready for a Christmas reunion I was sure would make her happy. I sat in the airport waiting area for the short drive to Boise suburbs, pulling out my phone to call Emily. I wanted to hear her voice, make sure she was home. The phone rang and rang, each tone tightening my nerve. No answer. I frowned, thinking maybe she was busy preparing Christmas dinner with the Whitlock family. I called again, then once more. Always the same. Silence. A nod of unease settled in my chest, spreading like ink on paper. I sent a text. Mum's on her way. You home? I stared at the screen, waiting for the little blue check mark. Nothing came. I tried to shake off the bad feeling, convincing myself she'd left her phone somewhere, or was distracted decorating the Christmas tree like she did every year. The plane had landed in Boise after dark. I dragged my suitcase out of the airport, and the winter night's cold hit me hard, sinking into my skin. Families were hugging, laughing, heading to midnight mass. A dad carried his little girl on his shoulders. She held a candy cane and giggled happily. I watched them, a lump tightening in my throat. I'd carried Emily like that too, held her hand through streets twinkling with Christmas lights. But now I was alone, pulling a heavy suitcase, stepping out of the airport with an indescribable loneliness. I flagged a taxi, and with a voice hoarse from exhaustion said, "Take me to Meadow Creek, 12th Street. On the way, traffic was slow, the streets packed with people, bundled in coats and scarves, heading to church for Mass. I stared out the taxi window at the warm lights glowing from houses along the road. Church bells rang faintly in the distance, mixed with a choir singing Silent Night somewhere nearby. I smiled, picturing Emily busy in the kitchen, making the mashed potatoes she'd learned from me. When the car stopped at an intersection, I glanced outside and spotted a group of cops directing traffic. Among them, I recognized Jake, a former student from my days teaching Taekwondo at the local community center. He stood tall, confident in his police uniform, but still had that same kind smile. I rolled down the window and shouted, "Jake?" He turned, his eyes lighting up as he recognized me. "Miss Rose, you're back," he exclaimed, adjusting his police cap. I smiled, trying to hide my exhaustion. "Yeah, just finished training in Seattle. You still working in Boise?" Jake nodded, his smile bright. "Yep, traffic cop now. You're here for Christmas with family." "With Emily," I said, my heart warming at the mention of my daughter. But then Jake's face froze. His smile faded. A flicker of doubt passed through his eyes, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. A bad feeling sparked in me like a flame starting to spread. "What's wrong, Jake?" "Something up?" I asked, lowering my voice. He shook his head, forcing a smile. No, it's nothing, Ms. Rose. Just glad you're back." But his eyes betrayed worry. I wanted to press him, but the light turned green. The driver hit the gas, and the car pulled away, leaving Jake watching me from the street, gripping the brim of his cap tightly. As we neared Emily's house, I asked the driver to stop a short distance from the gate. I wanted to surprise them, to see Emily's face when she found me standing at the door. I grabbed my suitcase and walked through the snow-covered path, my boots leaving deep prints. The golden glow from the houses around shone like lit candles. From a distance, I heard a guitar and singing coming from Emily's living room. I smiled, picturing her singing like when she was a kid, standing by my side, belting out Winter Wonderland with that clear voice. I left my suitcase on the step, took a deep breath, and got ready to knock. But then a mocking laugh cut through the air, sharp as a knife. I froze. My hand hovered, not touching the door. Mr. Harold Whitlock's deep, gruff voice boomed clearly. "That's what they call a woman who can't even have kids. For miscarriages. Haven't they embarrassed us enough?" His laugh was heavy, dripping with contempt. Then Ryan's voice, cold and cruel, chimed in, always faking depression, locking herself in her room to do nothing. "If it weren't for my parents, I'd have kicked her out ages ago." Another laugh erupted, followed by the clinking of wine glasses. I heard Abigail, Ryan's sister, her tone venomous. "Yeah, totally useless. A wife who can't have kids. What's she good for? Pretending to be sick just to get coddled. Pathetic." Each word stabbed my heart. I stood there paralyzed, my breath caught in my throat. This was how they treated my Emily, my daughter, who dreamed of a happy family, who poured her heart into every meal for her husband. Now they were humiliating her like this, for miscarriages, each one leaving her sobbing until she had no tears left during our phone call. And now they said she was faking it. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, and that's when I saw Emily curled up in a wooden chair on the porch in just a thin blouse, her head bowed, her whole body trembling in the freezing cold. My eyes blurred with tears. My heart stopped. I scooped Emily into my arms. Her body was still shaking, cold as a block of ice. My hands trembled, too, not just from the bitter Boise night, but from the rage burning in my chest. Each step toward the Whitlock's door felt like it carried 1,000 pounds, but I didn't stop. I pounded on the wooden door, my knocks firm, drowning out the Christmas music blaring inside. Jingle bells looped over and over, mocking the painful scene I just witnessed. No one came to open it. I gritted my teeth and banged harder, like I wanted to knock the door down in one blow. Finally, the door swung open. Mrs. Evelyn stood there, a glass of red wine wobbling in her hand, her lips painted bright red, glossy under the light. The smell of alcohol wafted from her, but her face wore a forced smile, trying to seem polite. "Hey, Miss Rose, what a surprise," she said, her voice syrupy but fake, like I was an unwelcome guest. "Why didn't you let us know so we could roll out the red carpet?" I locked eyes with her, not bothering to hide my anger. "Let you know," I growled, each word hissing through my teeth. "If I'd let you know, how would I have seen this? What did you do to my daughter?" I held Emily tighter, feeling her faint breath against my shoulder. Each breath was a reminder I couldn't let this slide. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, glancing at Emily in my arms with a grimace, like she was looking at something annoying. "Emily just wanted some fresh air," she said, her tone soft but laced with contempt. "Don't make a big deal out of it. It's Christmas. Come in. Don't stand out in the cold." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Fresh air, while my daughter was practically freezing outside in a thin blouse. Before I could respond, Ryan appeared behind his mother, his shirt unbuttoned, exuding deliberate nonchalance. He held a bottle of wine and shot me a defiant look. "Mum, close the door," he said, his tone dripping with arrogance, chin raised. "Let her stay out there till she gets over it. Who shows up to Christmas dinner acting all fragile to get out of helping?" He let out a mocking chuckle, like he'd said something clever. Those words were another knife, not just in my heart, but in Emily's. I felt her body shrink in my arms like she wanted to vanish. From the table, Abigail's voice rang out sharp and venomous. "Exactly. A woman who can't even carry a baby to term. What's she worth? Useless." Her laugh cut like a blade, mixing with the murmurs of others around the table. I heard Abigail's 2 kids, Emily's cousins, run out to the porch. Curious, they looked at Emily in my arms, then giggled, whispering to each other. Aunt Emily's in trouble. Their innocent little voices burned like salt in an open wound. My face flushed with rage. I rammed my shoulder into the door, then kicked it hard. The door flew open, slamming against the wall with a bang that silenced the room. Evelyn's wine sloshed, spilling red stains onto the expensive rug. The Christmas music stopped abruptly, like someone had yanked the speaker's plug. The air in the room turned heavy, suffocating, like all the oxygen had been sucked out. I stepped into the center of the living room, still holding Emily. Each step left a trail of melted snow on the hardwood floor, like marks of rage that couldn't be erased. Every eye was on me. Mr. Harold, his face cold. Evelyn, her fake smile gone. Abigail, her eyes full of disdain. The rest of the family, a mix of shock and annoyance. I felt their hostility in every glance, but I didn't care. Carefully, I settled Emily on the couch, draping my scarf over her shoulders. Her hands were still icy, trembling like the snow's cold still clung to her. I knelt, looking into her eyes, trying to give her some of my strength, though inside I was a storm of fury and pain. The Whitlocks' living room was still brightly lit. The fireplace crackled, but the atmosphere was thick, like everyone was bracing for an explosion. Ryan stepped closer, his face red from the wine, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. He lowered his voice, cold, but still smug, like he owned the place. "You don't get to make a scene in my house, Rose," he said, emphasizing my house like he was reminding me I was an outsider. Ryan stood tall, one hand on his hip, his shirt half unbuttoned in a gesture of contempt. But in his eyes, I caught a flicker of uncertainty. He knew I wasn't someone easily intimidated. I shot to my feet, pointing straight at his face, my voice trembling with fury. "No, right," I snapped. "And you think you have the right to throw my daughter out into the cold, to let her nearly freeze to death?" My blood boiled in my head. Every word exploded from my chest. "Is that what you call a husband? Is that what you call family?" I glanced around at the banquet table, the plates still steaming, the wine glasses glinting like they were mocking Emily's suffering. Mr. Harold Whitlock rose slowly from the head of the table, adjusting his suit jacket, his deep voice resonating with authority. "That's enough, Miss Rose," he said. "This is a family matter. A woman who can't bear children needs to learn to endure. That's just how it is." His words hit like a sledgehammer, cold and cruel. I locked eyes with him, seeing the arrogance of a man who'd spent years as a judge, used to controlling everything. But today, he'd picked the wrong opponent. I glanced at the table, where the roasted turkey still wafted its aroma, the cornbread stuffing neatly arranged, the wine sparkling under the lights. Then I looked at Emily, still shivering on the couch, her stomach faintly growling like a silent accusation. I couldn't hold back anymore. My voice erupted, sharp and cutting. "So, you feast while my daughter's outside in 32 weather. No coat, no food. That's what you call tradition. That's what you call humanity." Evelyn shrugged, her smile icy, like I was blowing things out of proportion. "A woman who can't have kids, even if she eats, is just a waste," she said softly, her voice dripping with disdain. She raised her wine glass and took a sip, as if to show she didn't care one bit about my feelings or Emily's. Abigail chimed in from the table, her tone acidic, rubbing salt in the wound. "Your daughter always uses depression as an excuse to avoid work," she said. "In all this time, has she ever cooked a decent meal for the family? All she does is lie in bed, whining, dragging everyone down." She shook her head, her eyes full of mockery. Like Emily, was a burden the whole Whitlock family had to bear. Murmurs from the relatives around the table grew louder. Some shook their heads, others snickered as if they agreed with those venomous words. Every sound, every sidelong glance, pierced my chest like another stab. I wanted to flip that fancy table over to demand justice for my daughter, but then a faint voice came from the couch. Emily, my little girl, had stirred. She tried to sit up, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the couch. "I'm so tired," she stammered, her voice breaking, barely audible. "No one understands." Her words were crushed instantly by Ryan's shout. "Enough," he barked. "Shut up. You've embarrassed me enough already." He stepped toward her, his gaze icy, like he wanted to shatter what little strength she had left. I saw Emily's shoulders slump, her red eyes brimming with tears, and my heart tightened. I stepped in front of her, ready to do whatever it took to protect her. Memories of Emily flooded my mind like an avalanche. I remembered the days she'd call me, sobbing over the phone, each time she lost a child, the first, the second, the third, the fourth. With every miscarriage, her soul broke into pieces. She'd been a sweet girl who dreamed of a warm home, family dinners with her husband and kids, but the pain over and over had pushed her to the edge of despair. I tried to be there for her, even through long distance calls, but I never imagined the Whitlock family, the ones I trusted, would treat my daughter like this. Ryan, my son-in-law, who I once thought was a decent man, now showed his true face. A cruel bully who cast my daughter out into the cold, treating her like garbage. I was on the verge of losing it. Through the window, I saw Jake standing silently on the porch. Maybe he'd been patrolling the neighborhood, his hard gaze and clenched fist showing he'd heard and witnessed this cruelty. I gave him a slight nod, signaling him not to step in just yet. But inside, his presence was a ray of hope. I knew I wasn't alone. I had a witness, someone who knew the truth. Ryan took another step, pointing at me, dropping the mask of politeness. "I'm warning you, this is my house," he said. "Stay out of it, or things will get worse." He smirked, convinced I'd back down under the Whitlock family's power. He was wrong. I clenched my fists, my knuckles cracking, feeling all the rage I'd bottled up in my life explode in that moment. The air in the room was so thick, it felt like a single spark could set it all ablaze. I locked eyes with Ryan, my voice low, but sharp as a knife. "You think you can threaten me? You think you can keep hurting my daughter without paying a price? You're wrong, Ryan. I'm not letting this go." I turned to the whole Whitlock family, from Mr. Harold's cold stare to Evelyn's faint smirk to Abigail's disdainful glare. "All of you," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "You're going to pay for what you did to Emily." The Whitlocks' living room fell into a terrifying silence, like the air had been sucked out, leaving only a thick tension ready to explode. I placed my hand on Emily's shoulder, feeling her frail frame under the scarf, my voice steady and unwavering. "This isn't a private matter anymore. This is domestic abuse." My words landed like a stone in a still lake, rippling through everyone in the room. Evelyn, still holding her wineglass, let out a mocking laugh, swirling it like she was enjoying a joke. "Abuse," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm and arrogance. "We're just teaching her place. Rose, you should thank us for putting up with her this long." Ryan stepped closer, his eyes red from alcohol and rage. He spat his words, like he was chewing each one before letting it out. "She fakes depression, fakes pain to do nothing. No one's hitting her. We're just sick of her uselessness." He paused, staring at me with a twisted smile. "Teach your daughter again, Rose. Nobody loses 4 pregnancies in a row. Maybe she did it on purpose." Those words were like a razor blade. They didn't just cut my heart, they tore open Emily's unhealed wounds. I heard her breath catch like she'd been punched in the chest. For miscarriages. For times she called me sobbing, her voice broken, saying she'd lost the children she could never hold. Each time I could only clutch the phone, helpless from afar, trying to comfort her with empty words. And now Ryan dared to stand in front of me and say she'd done it on purpose. I clenched my fist so hard, my nails dug into my palm, blood rushing to my face. He'd crossed a line I couldn't forgive. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My hand shook, but I quickly dialed the nearest police station. "I'm calling the cops," I said, my voice cold as ice, though inside I was a hurricane. "A report will be filed. You'll answer to the law." I emphasized each word like I was carving them into the air, making sure everyone knew I wasn't bluffing. Ryan froze. The wine bottle slipped from his hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor, red wine staining the expensive rug. Panic flashed in his eyes, though he tried to regain his air of superiority. "You wouldn't dare," he shouted, but his voice wavered like he hadn't expected me to go this far. Mr. Harold, who'd been watching with a cold expression, stepped forward, adjusting his tie, his deep, growly voice booming with authority. "You have no idea who you're challenging, Rose," he said. "I've spent my life on the judge's bench. I've seen the worst this world has to offer. You think a phone call will make us tremble?" His eyes were sharp as knives, reminding me the Whitlock family wasn't easily shaken. But I didn't back down. I'd seen my daughter shivering in the cold, and nothing, not even Mr. Harold's power, would silence me. Abigail from the table crossed her arms and let out a mocking smile. "Go ahead, make the call, Ms. Rose," she said, her tone taunting. "Let's see who they believe. A crazy old lady or a respected family like ours? You think the police will side with you?" Her venomous laugh rang out, confident I'd fail. Emily, still on the couch, tugged at my sleeve, her voice trembling in a whisper. "Mum, please don't do it. I just want peace." Her red eyes, full of fear, seemed to say she was terrified things would get worse. I looked at her, my heart aching. I knew she was scared. Scared of the Whitlocks' retaliation, of more humiliation piling on. But I also knew if I stopped now, Emily would be trapped in this pain forever. I squeezed her hand tightly, trying to pass her some of my courage. "You don't have to be afraid," I said softly, but firmly. "I'll protect you, I promise." I lifted her in my arms, snow from her clothes falling onto the rug like pieces of a shattered dream. I ignored the Whitlocks' scornful glares and their muttered threats. All I knew was I had to get her out of that place, out of that cage of cruelty she'd been locked in for too long. As I turned toward the door, I saw Jake through the foggy glass, standing on the porch. His hand rested on his radio, his eyes burning with a hidden fire, ready to act at any moment. I gave him a slight nod, enough to let him know I was ready for the fight. Jake nodded back firmly, his hands still gripping the radio like a promise he'd stand by me. I walked out without looking back. Behind me, I heard Evelyn yelling at the housekeeper to clean the spilled wine on the rug. I heard Ryan slam his hand on the table, muttering a curse. Then Mr. Harold's deep, angry voice echoed as he called someone on the phone. All those sounds were like arrows piercing my back, but I didn't care. I took Emily to my small apartment near the National Training Center, where I'd lived for years as a coach. It wasn't fancy, just a living room with an old couch, a simple kitchen in the corner, and a few family photos on the wall. But to me, it was a safe place where I could shield my girl from the Whitlocks' insults and the cruel cold. I carried Emily to her room and gently settled her on the bed. She was still shivering, though wrapped in my thick coat. I dug through the closet for an old sweater, put it on her, then made a mug of hot cocoa, its sweet aroma filling the chilly air. "Drink this, sweetheart," I whispered, placing the mug in her hands. But she just stared at it, her eyes empty, like she didn't believe she deserved even a bit of warmth. My phone rang, cutting through my thoughts. It was Jake. His voice was deep and steady. "Ms. Rose, I just filed the initial report at the station, but the Whitlocks won't go down easy. They've got influence. You know that. I'm ready to testify as a witness if you need me." I felt the determination in his tone, like a small flame that never dies. Jake, my old student, the one who once stood in the dojo with bright eyes, was now by my side in a different kind of fight. "Help me prepare, Jake," I said, my voice brief but full of gratitude. "This could be a long battle," he replied with a simple, "I got it, coach." "I'm here." The next morning, I took Emily to a therapist in downtown Boise. Dr. Linda Carter, an older woman with a kind gaze, welcomed us into a cozy office. After talking with Emily, she looked at me, her voice heavy and sad. She's suffering from severe depression, Miss Rose. 4 miscarriages combined with constant insults from her in-laws have crushed her confidence. She needs rest, treatment, and above all, to feel safe. I nodded, my heart tightening. I knew Emily wasn't okay, but hearing it from the therapist felt like another stab. I looked at her, curled up in the chair, her hands clasped tightly, and blamed myself for not being there sooner. That afternoon, Jake stopped by the apartment out of his police uniform, carrying a bag of fruit and some old cookbooks. He set them in front of Emily, hesitating. "I know you like cooking," he said. "Thought maybe starting small, like a pie or some chicken noodle soup, might make you feel better." His voice was gentle, but I saw the worry in his eyes. Emily lowered her head, clutching the edge of her blouse, and murmured, "Thanks, but I don't think I can do anything anymore." Her words pierced my chest like a needle. Jake's face fell for a moment, but he didn't push her, just nodded quietly. He left the bag on the table and turned to me. "Ms. Rose, whatever you need, just say it. I've got your back." That night, after Emily was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table under the dim light, surrounded by papers. I heard a noise outside, then saw a thick envelope slide under the door, silent as a quiet threat. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, the letters messy. "Don't mess with the Whitlock family if you don't want to end up as miserable as your daughter. Give up." My blood boiled as I read it. I crumpled the paper and threw it hard into the trash, the sound breaking the silence. That threat didn't scare me, it only fueled me. They thought I'd back down. They were wrong. That same night, I started organizing all the proof of money I'd sent Emily over the years. Bank receipts, messages with my notes of love. Each was evidence I'd always tried to support her. Even though Ryan and his family had squandered most of it, every paper was a memory. The times Emily called, her voice shaky, saying she wanted to buy something for the house, only for Ryan to tell her it wasn't needed. I gripped the pen so hard it nearly snapped. I'd trusted Ryan. I thought he'd take care of my daughter, but he only saw her as a tool, and when she stopped being useful, he discarded her without mercy. Emily woke up in the middle of the night. She stumbled out of her room, legs trembling, and saw me at the table, buried in papers, my eyes tired but full of fear. "Mum," she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm scared. I'm scared they'll do something to you." I looked up, saw her red eyes, and felt my heart being squeezed. I stood, walked to her, and hugged her, feeling her fragile body in my arm. "You don't have to be afraid," I said firmly, though inside I was a knot of nerves. "From now on, I'm the one who will protect you from everything. I promise." I took Emily back to bed, staying by her side until she fell asleep, but I couldn't sleep. I returned to the kitchen table, kept sorting papers, and made a list of what needed to be done. I called an old lawyer friend who'd helped me with a case tied to the Taekwondo team. He promised to look into it, but warned me, "The Whitlocks have a lot of pull in Boise, Miss Rose. They know people in the courts. Get ready for a long fight." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I know," I said, "but I'm not stopping." The weeks preparing the case felt like an endless nightmare. Every night, under the dim lamp in my small apartment, I reviewed page after page, rereading every bank receipt, every medical report about Emily. Those cold numbers and letters were proof of my love for my daughter, but also a painful reminder of everything she'd suffered. Finally, the first day of the trial came, and I felt like I was stepping onto a Taekwondo mat. Emily and I entered the Boise courthouse. The morning chills seeped through my thick coat. I held her hand, feeling her icy fingers tremble in my palm. Her eyes were red with dark circles, showing sleepless nights. She kept her head down like she wanted to hide from the stares. I stood tall, trying to be her rock, though inside I was just as shaken. "I'm here," I whispered, squeezing her hand gently. She nodded weakly, but her empty eyes showed she'd given up the fight long ago. The Whitlock family was already there early. Ryan, in a sharp grey suit, carried himself like a confident lawyer. Before the trial, he sat, adjusted his tie, and shot us a scornful glance. Next to him was Mr. Harold, walking slowly but with a gaze sharp as a blade. He flashed a confident smile, like he already knew the outcome. In the family row, Evelyn and Abigail sat primly, dressed elegantly, whispering occasionally, throwing us looks. I felt their hostility in every gesture, but I forced myself to stay calm, reminding myself today wasn't my fight. It was Emily's. Jake was there too, sitting in the spectator section in his police uniform. He gave me a slight nod, his steady gaze like a promise he wouldn't abandon us. His presence made me feel less alone, like I had an ally in this battle. I nodded back, silently thanking him for being there from that terrifying Christmas Eve to this day. The trial began. My lawyer, Mr. James, stood and presented each piece of evidence clearly. He showed the bank transfers I'd sent Emily over the years, proving I'd always supported her, though most of that money ended up in Ryan's hands. He also presented Emily's medical records with detailed notes from the therapist about her depression. After 4 miscarriages and constant insults from her husband's family, Emily didn't just suffer physically, she was emotionally destroyed, James said, his voice thick with emotion. They treated her like an outsider in her own home. I looked at Emily, her head bowed, hands clasped tightly like she was trying to hold in the pain. I wanted to stand and hug her, but I knew I had to stay strong and let the lawyer do his job. Then the young lawyers for the Whitlock family stood up, and I felt injustice creeping into the courtroom. One of them, in a sleek black suit, spoke with a commanding voice. Emily's just faking illness to be coddled. The Whitlock family gave her everything: shelter, food, every need met. But she didn't hold up her end. She failed as a wife. Those words slapped me across the face. Faking, coddled. I clenched my fist so hard I felt my blood boil. They called a witness, Mrs. Marta, the Whitlock's former housekeeper. She took the stand, eyes darting, voice shaky. Mrs. Emily was lazy, she said. She'd lock herself in her room all day, neglecting the house. I had to do everything. Cooking, cleaning. I couldn't believe my ears. Emily, the same woman who lovingly prepared every meal, who made homemade pies to please the whole family, now branded as lazy. I shot to my feet, unable to hold back. You're lying? Emily was never like that. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern face, slammed his gavel and said coldly, "Silence, please. This is a courtroom." I sat back down, my heart racing, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I glanced at Mr. Harold Whitlock. He smiled, a subtle, smug nod to the judge. An invisible thread between them chilled my skin. Something wasn't right. I felt it clearly. They'd planned this day, and I was just a pawn in their chess game. Emily stayed hunched over, her trembling hands gripping the chair's edge. I saw Jake in the back row, jaw clenched, fists tight, like he was fighting to contain his own fury. Mr. James, our lawyer, pressed on, his voice steady. We'd like to present key evidence. A recording from Christmas Eve, capturing the Whitlock family's insults and psychological abuse toward Emily. He played the audio Jake had secretly recorded. Ryan's voice boomed, cold and cruel. She's just faking depression to dodge her duties. Then Evelyn's, a woman who can't have kids, even if she eats well, is useless. And Abigail's sarcastic, she can't even manage to give birth. The courtroom fell silent, only faint whispers breaking through. I looked at Emily, saw her shrink, as if those words stabbed her all over again. But the Whitlock's lawyer jumped up, objecting. That recording is illegal. Made without consent. It violates privacy rights. The judge nodded, his voice dry. The recording is inadmissible. I felt the ground open beneath me, clutching the chair to keep from collapsing. The recording, the clearest proof of the Whitlock's cruelty, tossed out on a technicality. Murmurs filled the room. Some gasped in disbelief. Others shook their heads, confused. I looked at Jake, his head bowed, fists trembling on his knees. Emily hid her face in her hands, shoulders shaking as she fought back tears. I wanted to lose it, to rush the judge's bench and demand justice. But I knew in that room justice wasn't on our side. Mr. Harold sat there, his gaze calm but arrogant, like he'd known this would happen. I squeezed Emily's hand, trying to give her strength, though I felt defeated myself. After a week of grueling trial days, the final verdict came. I sat in the Boise courthouse holding Emily's hand, her cold, trembling fingers in mine. All week I'd tried to stay strong, but every night, back at my small apartment, my heart ached with anguish and helplessness. Emily sat beside me, eyes red from sleepless nights, her face pale, like life had been drained from her. I gripped her hand, trying to pass her some courage, though I was trembling too. Ryan strode into the room, adjusting his tie like it was just another day. Evelyn, his mother, smoothed her dress and sat upright, lips painted deep red, a confident smile on her face, like she already knew the outcome. Abigail, in a flashy outfit, shot us a scornful look. Mr. Harold stood behind Ryan, imposing his gaze hard, reminding us the Whitlock family always had everything under control. Jake was in the spectator section, still in his police uniform. His eyes were steady, but couldn't hide his worry. He gave me a slight nod, a silent promise he'd be there no matter what. I returned a grateful look, comforted by his presence. But when the judge, a middle-aged man with an expressionless face, entered, a chill ran down my spine. The air grew heavy, like everyone braced for an inevitable verdict. The judge spoke, his voice dry and firm. The court grants the divorce request of the plaintiff, Emily Harper Larson, and the defendant, Ryan Whitlock. Those words sparked a ray of hope inside me. Emily broke into silent tears, tears streaming down her cheek. I squeezed her hand, urging her to stay calm and listen. The divorce was what I wanted for Emily, a chance to escape the Whitlocks' cruel cage. But I knew the ruling wasn't the end. The judge continued, his voice monotonous, like reading a report. However, the court does not recognize the claims of domestic abuse due to insufficient legal evidence. As for assets, since Ryan Whitlock contributed more to the marriage's upkeep, the court awards him the majority of shared property. Those words hit like a hammer to my chest. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. No recognition of domestic abuse, insufficient evidence. I remembered the Christmas Eve recording, Ryan, Evelyn, and Abigail's cruel words discarded over a technicality. I thought of Emily's medical records, the bank receipts, all twisted by the Whitlocks' lawyers into evidence against us. Then it hit me. Mr. Harold, with his past as a judge and deep ties in the judicial system, had rigged it. I looked at him, saw him tilt his head slightly, that smug smile still on his lips. It was all fixed. They'd manipulated the ruling, and Emily and I were just pawns in their game. I couldn't hold back anymore. I shot to my feet, my voice breaking with rage and pain. This is so unfair. This isn't justice. My shout echoed, silencing the room. Emily grabbed my hand, eyes wide with panic, but I didn't stop. You saw how they treated my daughter. You heard what she endured, and you still dare say there was no abuse. You dare take everything from her. A guard approached, his voice firm. Ma'am, please sit down, or I'll have to ask you to leave. I glared at him, then at the judge, who sat there, face blank, like my words meant nothing. I sat, hands trembling, feeling the world crumble beneath me. Ryan turned, locked eyes with me, and flashed a mocking smile, adjusting his tie like he'd won a grand victory. Evelyn and Abigail nudged each other, giggling under their breath, making sure I heard. That laughter was a knife plunging deep into my heart. Mr. Harold nodded slowly, his gaze calm, like this was just another case he'd pulled strings on. I looked at them all, one by one, my blood boiling. They hadn't just stolen Emily's justice. They'd stolen my faith in a system I once thought was fair. Emily covered her face with her hands, her body shaking, her muffled sobs tearing me apart. I wanted to hug her, tell her everything would be okay, but no words came. The judge's verdict echoed in my mind like a life sentence, one that didn't just crush Emily, but shackled me as well. At the back of the courtroom, Jake shot to his feet, eyes blazing at the Whitlocks' rage radiating off him. His fists were clenched, veins straining as though he was holding back a hurricane. I gestured for him to stay calm, even though every bone in my body wanted to scream, to flip the tables, to shatter everything in sight. The judge banged the gavel hard, voice stern and final. Order. This session is concluded. Everyone may leave. That sharp rap of wood on wood was meant to be an ending, but for me, it marked the beginning of a new torment. Chairs scraped back. Papers rustled, whispers buzzed around us. Yet I stayed rooted, clutching Emily to my chest, her shoulders trembling, her sobs clawing at my insides. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but my throat locked, the words useless in the face of such cruelty. This ruling hadn't simply stolen her property, it had destroyed my last fragile faith that the law might protect her. Ryan strolled over with the swagger of a man who thought he'd conquered the world. Leaning close, his breath foul with arrogance, he hissed in my ear. See, Rose, told you not to fight me. You're nothing, just a worthless old woman. His smirk widened, eyes glinting with victory, before he spun on his heel like we were beneath his notice. His mockery was gasoline to the fire, already roaring in my blood. My fists clenched so tight they hurt. I was ready to launch myself at him, years of restraint as a taekwondo instructor crumbling all at once. My heart thundered. I was on the edge of snapping. Before I could move, Jake stepped in front of me, his body rigid with fury, his lips pressed into a thin line, his knuckles white, his entire frame trembling with the need to strike. I recognized my own rage reflected in him, wild, consuming, impossible to cage. Gasps filled the courtroom. Are they going to fight? Someone whispered. Phones lifted. Flashes popped. A reporter in the corner raised his camera, hunger for scandal in his eyes. Ryan turned, startled for an instant, but quickly recovered his sneer. He stepped closer, practically begging for a punch. "Go on, hit me. I'll make sure you lose everything. Who do you think you are? Just some washed-up cop?" Jake's chest heaved, his fist trembling mid-air, eyes bloodshot. I could see the edge of no return. Then Emily tore free of my arms and hurled herself at him, wrapping herself around his arm, sobbing with every ounce of strength left in her. "No, please don't. I don't want you or Mum to sink to his level. I just want peace. I just want to live." Her voice pierced through the noise like a bell, silencing everyone. Tears streamed down her face, her small hands clinging desperately to Jake as if he were her lifeline. Jake froze, his fist shaking, his jaw tight, until finally his arm dropped. He bowed his head, rage still coursing through him, but contained for her. Cameras clicked, capturing the heartbreaking image. Emily clinging to Jake, Ryan grinning coldly a few feet away. Some in the audience, even those unfamiliar with the case, were openly crying. I glanced around, one woman dabbing her eyes, a man shaking his head in grief. But Evelyn and Abigail smirked, whispering to each other like spectators, enjoying a cruel play. Mr. Harold sat back, composed, still exuding his usual air of authority, as though he remained in control. The judge slammed the gavel again, voice icy. "Order. If this continues, I'll have guards clear the room." The sharp cracks snapped everyone back into uneasy silence. I stepped forward, pulling Emily into my arms. She shook like a child lost in a storm. Jake stood at our side, head bowed, lips tight, guilt etched into his features. I reached out, squeezed his shoulder, letting him know I was grateful for his presence. Ryan adjusted his tie with a smug flick and marched off, Evelyn and Abigail trailing behind with laughter that stabbed me like knives. Slowly, the courtroom emptied, until only the three of us remained, me, my broken daughter, and Jake, each choking on the same bitter lump in our throats. Emily whispered through her tears, "Mum, I don't want to fight anymore. I'm so tired. Can we just go home?" The words shattered me. I longed to promise her everything would be okay, but my throat was locked tight, so I simply led her out, Jake shadowing us silently. Outside, Boise sunlight filtered through tall windows, but it brought no warmth. This verdict wasn't just a defeat, it was a declaration of war. The Whitlocks may have won a battle, but I swore they would not win Emily's life. I looked at her tear-streaked face. Behind the pain, a tiny spark still flickered. For that fragile light, I vowed never to give up. The days that followed carried a strange undercurrent. Local papers splashed headlines across their front pages. "Whitlock trial, justice for sale." Seeing those words made my chest pound. They spoke the truth we'd lived. On social media, a video of Emily clinging to Jake went viral. Her desperate cry, begging for peace, broke thousands of hearts. Comments poured in. "The Whitlocks think they're untouchable. Emily deserves better." For the first time, the community's voice echoed our pain, and it gave me a sliver of comfort. Whispers began swirling. Mr. Harold's old colleagues murmured that he had bent the system with his influence. Ryan, once respected, was now mocked as the lawyer of injustice. The Whitlocks' polished image cracked, their prestige collapsing like a sandcastle under the tide. I didn't gloat, but I couldn't deny the small measure of justice it brought. I brought Emily home to my modest apartment, warm yellow lamps, family pictures lining the wall. Each morning, I rose early to make her breakfast. Some days, pancakes dripping with syrup, other days, simple eggs and toast. Emily would sit quietly with a mug of tea, staring at the sun slipping through Boise rooftops. Sometimes silent tears slid down her cheeks. Slowly, though she began to heal, her voice returned bit by bit, her eyes a little less hollow each day. I didn't force her. I simply stayed near, the shield every mother longs to be. Jake became a steady presence. He'd drop by with poinsettias or donuts, each visit sparking a faint glow in Emily's eyes. One afternoon, clearly nervous, he handed her a small box. Inside lay a tiny keychain shaped like a taekwondo uniform, the same emblem I once taught my students. "You don't have to be strong all at once," he told her gently, "but you can rebuild, little by little, just like Ms. Rose did." Emily froze, overcome. Her eyes shimmered as she whispered, "Thank you." Watching from a distance, I felt years of weight lift from my chest. For so long she had been belittled, dismissed. Now someone finally saw her worth, not for what she could provide, but for who she was. Quietly, I wiped a tear from my cheek. One evening, with the apartment bathed in golden sunset, Emily sat across from Jake, twisting her sweater nervously. Her voice trembled. "Jake, I might never have children. If that disappoints you," she stopped, as though the words themselves could shatter everything. I pretended to wash dishes in the kitchen. Breath held. Jake smiled warmly. took her hands. I don't need that, Emily. You are already my family. Those words melted the ice around my heart. For years she had been humiliated, branded as inadequate. Now someone told her she was enough, worthy of love, simply for being herself. Tears blurred my vision as gratitude swelled inside me. On Easter, I held Emily's hand, and we wandered Boise's lively main square, just as we had when she was little. The air buzzed with children's laughter and the smell of fresh pies. Emily wore a light sweater, hair tied up, and for the first time in months, she smiled a radiant spring smile. "Mum," she said softly, "I miss this. I miss when we baked apple pie together, when you told me about your matches." I squeezed her hand. "I miss it too, sweetheart, and I'll always be here to make new memories with you." We sat on a bench, watching children play by the fountain. It struck me then, courtrooms may twist justice, but no one can steal the justice of the heart, love, respect, resilience. Emily, though scarred, was rediscovering herself day by day, and I, a mother once powerless, realized my truest strength wasn't in my fists, but in my love for her. Jake arrived with warm cherries, handing one to Emily. They laughed, talking easily, and I watched with hope swelling in my chest. Emily might never forget what the Whitlocks stole, but she was moving forward, embracing love from those who truly valued her. At 65, after countless battles, I knew this. The fight for my daughter's happiness was the most important of all. This story is fictional, inspired by real struggles. Names and places are altered. We share it not to judge, but to remind others many mothers suffer in silence. And I wonder, if you stood in my shoes, what would you do? Stay silent for peace, or rise and reclaim your voice? Because every story is a candle, and courage can light the path to brighter days.